So I'm blessed today to have the honor, to announce a little bit on this call and to give you a little bit of an introduction. And, first of all, I want to acknowledge May for arranging this amazing call, to bringing this up and having all of us joining here together. You have such a beautiful, massive, huge heart. I don't know if you know how a heart like this fits in a small body like that, but it's absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for setting this up, May. This is really beautiful. And then I have also the blessings and the honor really to introduce somebody very, very special, Dr. Carolyn McMakin. And Dr. Carolyn, I'm gonna unmute you here as well. I know you're already unmuted, and I just wanted to really acknowledge you, probably on behalf of everybody who is, using Healy, using this technology since over 3 years now, because you have make it to your life purpose. The research about frequency, about this amazing technology, about this amazing wisdom that is really changing thousands of people's of lives, very soon hundreds, if not millions of people's of life. And I think this is really what you're giving to this world and to humanity is really something that needs to be acknowledged, because I've seen you in Poland doing your work, and I've seen you on YouTube doing your work, and I've seen you since years and years and years. We are following you, and you have a big community of really raving fans for your knowledge, for your wisdom, for the things that you have created. Because of people like you bring this technology closer to us. You make it actually possible that we are able to tap into the most powerful form of our lives, which is our energy. You are actually making it possible that people become aware that we are an energy field with a body and not just a body. And there's so much possible. And I also think we can agree on that we just getting started. This technology is, the wisdom is around since, I don't know how many hundreds, thousands, probably millions of years, because it is the most fundamental form of this life. But now being able to tap in, now being able to use technology, devices to actually help us, support us, influence us, improve our lives in all sorts of levels. And you are really one of the thought leaders in the space. You're one of the persons who made this possible. So I really, really want to acknowledge you. And guys, if you agree with me, please drop a 1 in the comments to share a little bit of love to Dr. Carolyn McMakin, because what she has created is actually changing not only our lives, but changing so many, many lives. So it's a life work. And I really want to say thank you so much for all you're doing. And thank you especially to be also here tonight on this call with us. So we really, really honored to have you here. So I would just, without further ado, just give it to you so you can dive deep in the presentation, because we have amazing things to say today, not only about this technology, but also about a new device here, which I'm holding in hand. And actually it falls into mud yesterday, and I didn't clean the mud because I like my Healy to be unique. And we are a new company with a unique technology. And I'm telling you that far, it is so freaking powerful. And I just told Caroline, I put it on my body, on my organs, and I can actually feel my organs having a party. I don't know what's going on with this magnet field, but it seems to be super, super strong. So I'm really excited to hear more about it and to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here, Caroline. So over to you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. This is 27 years worth of work using frequencies. And there are 2 presentations. One is, I'm going to share the screen and see if I can get the MagHealy one. Let's see. Let's see what that one does. There we go. The first one is about the MagHealy, and the language about MagHealy has to be fairly specific. We've been using frequency-specific microcurrents since 1995, so it's been around almost 30 years. And the shift came when I saw the Healy for the first time in Germany 5 years ago, and asked them, could we take 2 Healys put them together and run dual frequencies. And the answer came back in 3 days from the technical people and the marketing people. The answer was yes. So frequency-specific microcurrent, especially for the team that's been using the Healy, is an entirely new paradigm using 2 frequencies and resonance to change health. And my goal has always been to change lives. The most important thing, honestly, besides the fact that the frequencies have to work, the most important thing is regulatory compliance. FSM and frequencies cannot make any claims about being able to diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent any condition or disease. And that this is in the US. We made this agreement with the FDA, but every country has regulatory agencies that oversee the claims that are made for different medical technologies. So the statements and techniques taught in this seminar were inspected by the FDA, our regulatory body, and no changes to the material were required. The use of frequencies as a therapeutic tool has not been evaluated by the FDA or any regulatory body. It is FSM's intention to be in compliance with all regulatory agency requirements. And according to the FDA, which is the regulatory body in the United States, I am a clinician sharing my clinical experience with other clinicians and patients in order to encourage education and research of novel techniques as a matter of free speech. So I'm not making any claims. I'm just telling you what we do with this. And the devices are separate from the frequencies. The devices in the US have a 510K approval in the category of TENS devices for the treatment of pain, and no claims are made for the devices beyond pain management. Now, Pulse DMF has a slightly different regulatory status. So you have to ask what would happen to your life and your health if you could reduce inflammation and stress, harmonize your being and your body, balance autonomic function, and increase cellular energy by 500% quickly without drugs or side effects. And there was a reasonable mechanism of action and some data. Well, frequency-specific microcurrent is the technology that is used in the MagHealy, and it's a new tool. You probably didn't know you needed, especially if you've been using the Healy, that does something that you didn't think was possible. Now, the history of the use of frequency-specific therapies were developed in the early 1900s by MDs and osteopaths in the US, the UK, and Germany, and used by thousands of physicians until around 1934. In 1910, the Flexner Report suggested that medicine should become standardized by establishing standard medical education, reducing the number of medical schools, especially Black medical schools, eliminating non-pharmaceutical and unscientific, in quotes, approaches. And the effects of the Flexner Report were not fully implemented until about 1934. Come on. Homeopathy, traditional osteopathy, eclectic medicine, electromagnetic therapies, and physiomedicine, botanical medicine were all derided. The report also concluded that there were way too many medical schools. The Flexner Report caused the closure of all but 2 Negro medical schools and the reversion of American universities to male-only admittance to accommodate a smaller admission pool. Medicine became the realm of white males and pharmaceuticals. Okay, looks like I can only change them that way. So medicine labeled electromagnetic therapies as fakes, which is why we have to be so careful about regulatory compliance. Drugs and surgery were to be the only tools of medicine. Nutrition, herbs, homeopathy, and frequency therapies were outlawed, and every healthcare intervention except for prescription medication and radiation were outlawed. Physicians who used these tools would lose their license to practice. The devices went into the back rooms. The research and the history were lost. If you've ever had to bury your father or grandfather, you know that when you went to his library, you didn't know what those papers and books meant. So they went either on the trash heap or in the fireplace, or they were donated someplace. But all the research about how the frequencies were developed, how did they know in 1922 that 396 hertz would be the frequency that consistently would resonate with the nerve? And the practitioners who continued to use these devices were persecuted. So I met George Douglas in 1991. MagHealy wanted to know the story. So George Douglas met Harry Van Gelder in 1977. Van Gelder was an osteopath and naturopath from Australia and the UK who bought a practice in Canada in 1946. That practice came with a device that was made in 1922, and that device came with a list of frequencies. So the provenance is the device from 1922, covered up with a sheet that came with a practice in 1946. In 1983, George Douglas worked with Van Gelder in his office for 3 months and brought a copy of the frequency list home and put it in a drawer. I've never seen the original 1922 device, ever. So I finished chiropractic college in 1994 when I was 47. George Douglas found the list in a drawer in 1995 and had me start using it on a patient. He suggested we use the frequencies with the original 2-channel microcurrent device because Van Gelder's machine had 2 channels, one for a condition, one for a tissue. I have no idea how the frequencies were derived, but we're really not sure how they work. We do know the 1920s equipment was not microcurrent, and the 1920s therapy was not FSM. Van Gelder's system used one frequency to resonate with a tissue and one frequency to resonate with a condition that caused interference with the proper function of that tissue. So the theory is, if the interference was removed, then the tissue would return to its natural state of harmony and balance and function. So we first used them in 1995 to treat muscle pain and found out that they worked. Not only did they worked exceptionally well, to the point that I had to teach them in 1997, January 19th of 1997, to find out if the effects were reproducible. And by June of 97, we knew that they were reproducible. We had 10 practitioners who bought devices from a distributor. And by June of 1997, we knew the effects were reproducible. So then I had to keep teaching it because we were treating things like nerve and muscle pain that were untreatable. 1998, we figured out, more or less by accident, that inflammation in the nerve, using the 2 frequencies to reduce inflammation in the nerve, would treat nerve pain. 1999, we found out, more or less by accident and good guessing, that if you reduced inflammation in the spinal cord, it would reduce full body pain that manifests itself as fibromyalgia. The frequency benefits and effects are teachable and reproducible. So after 25 years, we have a good idea of what frequencies are useful to treat what tissues to relieve pain and improve function and harmony in different tissues. And the research in animals and humans and the clinical results have accumulated over the next 20 years. So clinical use of the specific frequencies is low risk. The frequencies either work or they don't work. If they don't work, they just have no effect. There is nothing for them to resonate with, which makes it possible to release an over-the-counter device like the MagHealy. You may have side effects, but they're usually transient. They've always been transient, and our students observe precautions and contraindications. Fortunately for me, medicine's pragmatic. There's efficacy first, and then they figure out the mechanisms later. We used willow bark for thousands of years, and then aspirin was distilled, and that was used for hundreds of years, and they still didn't know why it worked until Upjohn developed ibuprofen and figured out the prostaglandin effects that were making aspirin and willow bark and ibuprofen effective. It is worth noting that over 80% of the medications in use today have a mechanism of action that is not known, well understood, or proven. So the mechanism by which this works is not that important. So what is resonance? Resonance is the tendency of a system or a bond. So we're saying that the frequencies used together create resonance with the condition and the tissue. That's very specific. Resonance is the tendency of a system or a bond to oscillate at large amplitudes in response to some frequencies and not others. At the resonant frequency, very small forces can produce very large amplitude vibrations. So they found out in the 1700s that soldiers marching in step can collapse a bridge. Resonance explains the frequency effect when a singer like Julie Andrews sings a note that breaks a lead crystal glass. The reason that trick works is that there is a precise frequency that holds lead atoms together in a 70% lead crystal matrix. The lead atoms begin to vibrate with the singer's note as long as that note is precise. It's exactly the frequency that holds lead atoms together. And if she can hold it long enough to get the lead atoms to vibrate, then the lead crystal glass simply comes apart. Resonance is difficult to describe, but you all know it when you see it or feel it. The resonance of the music, when you go to a symphony hall, moves the audience as if you're all one. The music fills you with harmony. And when there is harmony, and when it's perfectly tuned, that resonance flows throughout the hall. Two tuning forks are tuned to the same frequency will vibrate in resonance with each other from across the room when one tuning fork is struck. So you hit this tuning fork, and this one will begin to hum without being touched by anything but the frequency that's coming from the first one. And if you have a little ball up against it, that ball will bounce without ever having been in contact with the first tuning fork, simply by the effect of resonance of the frequency. It's incredibly powerful. There was a bridge called the Tacoma-Narrows Bridge. It was particularly flexible, and it was placed across a narrow strait. There was a mild rainstorm that brought wind and rain, and the wind caused the bridge to sway. When the swaying reached the resonant frequency holding the bridge together, the bridge came apart. Resonance destroyed the bridge. not the force of the wind. It wasn't 100 miles an hour. It was 30 miles an hour. So this is what happened because of resonance. You started out with a bridge with cars and people on it. And then the bridge began to sway, and you see the sine wave beginning. And eventually the frequency of the swaying of the bridge reached the frequency that held the bridge together. And the bridge simply came apart in a 30-mile-an-hour wind because of resonance. That's how powerful resonance is. So how does resonance affect the human body? Every moving electron in the human body creates a magnetic field, and your body is full of moving electrons. Your body has a magnetic field, and every electromagnetic bond, the bond that holds these electrons together, has a frequency at which it resonates. This is an important principle. Every organ in the body is part of that field. This is the electromagnetic field around the heart. This is the electromagnetic field around the brain. Every receptor on every cell has a frequency to which it resonates. So every chemical, mechanical, and electrical bond has a frequency at which it resonates. Magnetic fields do not stop. They have no edges. They connect, they merge, and interact. And George Douglas, who gave us the list of frequencies that he got from Van Gelder, believed that your soul resonates with the material world to create your physical body across time and space. Interference happens if something interferes with the resonance. It creates imbalance, lack of harmony, and loss of proper function because the magnetic influence cannot travel effectively between the substances that are involved, and proper function, typical function, is interfered with. So it creates imbalance, lack of harmony, and loss of proper function. So if one or two violins are out of tune, the harmony disappears. You may not know why or how, but you can tell. You know when there's a problem. So balance and harmony, the theory behind resonance interventions is that interference inhibits proper function by creating loss of balance and harmony. Newtonian physics describes large objects, but it falls apart at the molecular level. It's just not true at a molecular level. For us, your body is a large object made of molecules, atoms, subatomic particles that are held together by electromagnetic bonds. Every bond has a frequency at which it resonates, whether it's citric acid or insulin. Every bond within that chemical in your body, within that structure in your body, whether it's fascia or nerve or cord or brain or gut, every bond has a frequency at which it resonates. The human body is a quantum biological system, and living tissue is biochemicals that are held together by electromagnetic bonds, and every bond has a frequency at which it resonates. So water lines the gel inside cells and forms structures that act very much like a semiconductor. This is a silicon crystal, and it has a hole in a particular place that's there all the time that allows a controlled rate of flow of electrons. And the water in your cells and in the fluid in your cells does the same thing. it creates a semiconductor that makes your body open to resonance the same way as if it was a computer chip. So your body looks solid, but it's an electromagnetic system, and the cells function as a semiconductor network, conveying current, charge, and information. So biological resonance explains the effects on living tissue. Drugs and nutrients act like keys in a lock to change membrane receptors and change intracellular function. Right? So your cell reacts to something out here, and the answer that it produces based on genetic expression is to create inflammation. Ibuprofen comes in and changes this receptor, so it changes the response here or here, and it stops the inflammatory response. Ibuprofen doesn't interfere out with the inflammation, it changes the cellular response. Okay, you with me? All right, I can get this. So biological resonance, the frequencies appear to act like the key remote, your key fob, opening a lock with an electromagnetic signal. Frequencies appear to change membrane protein configuration and cell function electromagnetically with a frequency-specific signal. It changes the receptor just like ibuprofen does and stops the inflammatory response. This is the theory. By changing this receptor electromagnetically, just like your key fob. And the response is very specific. Frequencies act as if they change signaling. We don't have proof yet. They act as if they dissolve scar tissue crosslinks. And you notice that your key remote sends a signal exactly and only to one car. Your key fob opens only your car, even if there are 12 identical cars in a row. Your remote opens only your car with a signal frequency, single frequency tuned exactly to your car. FSM seems to work like that with specific problems in specific cells. It's very specific. This is based on 25 years of research. So how do we know that frequencies affect biological tissue? It's science. The thing you do in science is you observe. It's like, wow, we changed nerve pain. I wonder if it will work again. Then you verify it. Yep, you take an objective measure of nerve pain, and then you repeat it. And that allows you to predict it, that if you have nerve pain and you do this thing, you observe that nerve pain will go down. Second basic principle of science is you can't throw out the data. The data is this, your observation, if it's measured and repeatable and done properly. You can't throw out the data if it doesn't match your model. The third basic principle of science is you change that model and start over. It's how it works. So we had animal research that showed that there was a 62% reduction in lipoxygenase-mediated inflammation, 30%, and this was a blinded animal trial, not done on blind animals, the researchers were blinded, 30% reduction in COX inflammation, which is equivalent to injectable Toradol. And it was a 4-minute time-dependent response, right? So half the effect was there in 2 minutes, the full effect was there in 4 minutes. It's right here. And she inserted a placebo frequency, and that frequency was just 40 hertz on A and 00 on B. This demonstrated clearly that you had to have 2 channels in order to have an optimal effect. This was done in 2003 at University of Sydney. Frequencies alone and single frequencies, no other frequency had the effect. Current alone had no effect. None of our other frequencies had an effect. we had frequencies reduce inflammation and pain. This was fibromyalgia, full body pain. We used the frequency to reduce inflammation in the spinal cord. The pain was reduced from a 7 to a 1 in 90 minutes. All of the inflammatory cytokines were reduced in 90 minutes. Fibromyalgia recovery was individualized and took up to 4 months. All of the cytokines were reduced at statistically significant levels. The pain was reduced significantly. In medicine, cytokines are hard to change, and when they change slowly over months. And then they returned at a much lower level. How does a frequency do that? Well, all of these cytokines were produced inside cells, and only changes in cell signaling could normalize them all so quickly. Cell receptors respond to external factors like bleeding, bacteria, tissue fragments that activate kinases inside the cell that change transcription factors, and that creates a cellular response. The data suggests that cell receptors responded to a frequency signal that turned that inflammation off. And we know from research that pulsed electromagnetic fields reduce inflammation. This was published in a medical journal, Bioelectricity, in 2019. FSM is not about the device. The MagHealy is an FSM device, but it's about the frequency effect. The frequencies were very specific. Inflammation reduces pain, redness, and swelling, but doesn't change range of motion. The frequency to reduce scarring reduces scarring, increases range of motion, but doesn't change pain. Hemorrhage stops bleeding, and pain in the menses prevents bruising after surgery. There's one frequency that the only thing it's good for is reducing kidney stone pain. And you have to be asking, how do specific frequencies change condition? So we have these observed effects: immediate changes in tissue, immediate changes in sensation that stop when the frequency is finished, and then there are lasting effects. So how does science explain the observed effects of FSM? Same principle: observe, verify, repeat, predict, observe. You can't throw out the data if it doesn't match your model, and we have 27 years of observation. So we had to change the model and start over. We know that the current by itself increases cellular energy. This was proven in 3 different papers that were published. Pulsed EMF fields also increase cellular energy. So we didn't know that the MagHealy magnetic field will increase cellular energy, and that made it transferable. FSM changes tissue quickly, but it needs manual and exercise therapy, nutrition, and lifestyle changes for lasting permanent results. So correct frequencies create instantaneous changes and change the state of the tissue. And that's why your small intestine, you could feel it in your organs. The changes can be permanent when the patient's metabolism, attitude, mechanics, diet, and lifestyle support the change in state. So water is completely stable as ice as long as the surrounding field is 0 degrees centigrade. It's completely stable as a liquid as long as it's between 0 and 100. And it's completely stable as steam, but it's the milieu, it's the patient's lifestyle and nutrition that create the stable state. So frequency-specific treatment is established since 1997. It's low risk, it's reproducible, it is teachable. I teach courses to professionals. It's reliable, it's non-invasive, it's comfortable. So when you harmonize blood flow, this is what happens when we treated diabetic neuropathy. It was healed in 6 weeks in 6 to 11 treatments. All of the sensation was normalized, and he did not have his toe amputated. That's one of the things that the magnetic field was good at. This was shingles in the ophthalmic branch of 5. The patient was pain-free in 1 hour. There was no return of pain, and the lesions were gone in 48 hours. That was published. These are our published papers. So when I talk about a protocol that is to harmonize neck pain, this is the data that supports it. It's a published paper. Low back pain, that was published in 2004, 8 years chronic. It took 6 treatments in 6 weeks. So this is not a one-visit fix. And it reduced the patient's low back pain. Neuropathic pain, fairly straightforward, is actually the easiest thing we treat. Scar tissue in the ulnar nerve, that resolved in 3 sessions after 11 years of failed therapy. Low back pain, this was published in India, and it was a huge group, and they had statistically significant effects. Delayed onset muscle soreness is a model for new injuries. And the thing with delayed onset muscle soreness is there is no other effective treatment. This was the treated leg. This was the sham leg. There was no doubt at 48 hours that FSM was effective. It reduced scar tissue in burn patients, which is the most serious kind of scar tissue. So what would happen to harmony, balance, health, and everything you do if you could reduce lipoxygenase-mediated inflammation by 62%, COX-mediated inflammation by 30%, and all inflammatory cytokines, and increase cellular energy? What would it do to harmony in your field? So FSM, as the MagHealy, is a new tool. You probably didn't know you did it, that does something you didn't think was possible. The resonance effect has been translated into German, Mandarin, French, Polish, English, obviously. So frequency-specific microcurrent will change your life forever. And so will the MagHealy. I'm very excited to have it be present for you.